Was it real? Was it accurate? Of course, this was for the most part, this was your imagination, right? The only part that we wonder about being real is the data that you got, you know. And the data that you got, if you just let it come, was likely to be real no matter how you interpreted it. Now, did we do any good? Probably. This many people all thinking about healing a particular person, we probably did some good. Yes, I'd say we did heal some. We've had some rather outstanding successes in doing this. The very first one of these we did in London this year. We had a lady who couldn't stand up. She had a disease where all her muscles and things cramp up, and she was kind of twisted up, couldn't stand, couldn't walk, just hobbled along. And she said that at the time that we were doing this, that she was in her kitchen and suddenly one foot just kind of shot out in the air and she grabbed hold of something. And then that foot went down, the other one shot. She said she laid down on the floor real fast before she fell. And her body kind of writhed and her arms and bones and everything was cracking. And by the time that was done, about 5 minutes later, she got up and walked and went out for a walk in the park with her husband for the first time in 5 years. So it did some good, you see. Yes, we probably are doing some good. Now, some of us in here are probably veteran healers. We probably do that a lot. And those people probably could bring a lot of focus on it. But just having more people brings more power to it. It is cumulative. Now, what does this mean? This means that if you really have somebody you want to heal, you have to keep doing it over and over again because it's cumulative. So you do this, and then you keep this in your mind. And what I mean by keep it in your mind, not that it has to always be in your intellect, but here's an example. Let's say you had some very, very important appointment you had to keep. If you kept this appointment, somebody was going to give you a check for $500,000, but if you didn't show up, it's gone. Okay, would you miss that appointment? No, you'd really be thinking about it all day long. You'd be looking at the watch, checking the day, making sure you got the right time, the right day, you know. You'd make sure your car was okay, have a second car standing by in case that one didn't start. You know, it would be in your mind all day long. Not that you're actually operating on it, it's just there, hanging in your mind because it's in your intention. That's what you need to do with this. You need to heal someone, keep that healing intent, keep that dark spot bright white, keep that health aura bright white all day long in the back of your mind. It just takes seconds. Every once in a while you kind of think about it. Oh yeah, it's still bright white. Okay, going about what you're doing. Just seconds. Just keep it in the back of your mind. Just like, oh yeah, it's not quite time yet. I got an hour. You know, and then you're back to doing whatever you were doing. And then maybe 4 or 5 times a day, actually drop into a meditative state and make that white, real bright. Sometimes you'll find that the dark tends to come back and you have to put more white, but you keep after it. So you keep it in the back of your mind and you repeat it 4 or 5 times a day. How long you should do that? I'd say a week, 2 weeks. Well, it's starting to sound like a lot of trouble, isn't it? That will give you results, even if you're a beginner. If you do that, keep it in the back of your mind all day, work on it 4 or 5 times a day, and do that for 2 weeks, you have about an 80 or 90% chance that even as a beginner, you will have an effect. And of course, an effect is what you're looking for. You're looking for a little evidence, right? Well, okay, you work on somebody and they get better. Well, maybe they just got better anyway. You don't know. Well, then you have to work on more people and see if they just get better. And eventually, you work on enough people, you'll know whether you're having an effect or not. Statistics would say half of them should get better anyway just because they do, and half of them won't just because they don't. If you have 80 or 90% of them getting better, then you're having an effect. So that's how you just have to do it, and do it a lot. I mean, we know any number of people that are ill, and we have friends that know people that are ill, and you don't need to know them personally. You know, Mr. X is fine, just as long as you can go back and get the data later to see whether you were right or wrong. That's the important part. If you just do it and never get any data, you'll never know whether you're being effective or not. So my suggestion to you, if you want to heal and you want to get good at it, do this often. After you've done it 100 times, you'll know. You'll know how effective you are, and you'll have your own tools developed. You'll be quick at it, and you'll probably be good at it. It takes about maybe 100 times, maybe 50 times. Sometimes you'll get quick at it. Maybe you're good at it already. Maybe not. It depends on, everybody's different. It just takes practice. And all the while, you need to be practicing your meditation so that you can cut out the noise, cut out the analysis, cut out the judgment. Okay, so that's how to get good at this thing. Notice we had some odd tools in there. We used fireplace tongs and blow torches and all kinds of things. Now, these are up to your own taste. If you're a delicate little lady and you want to use a fairy wand, that's fine. You know, fairy dust, it's your own tool, right? The tool is a help to focus your mind. Fairy dust works just as well as the fireplace tongs. It just depends. Now, why do we use tongs and rubber gloves and all that stuff? That's to protect you against your own beliefs. Of course, they're not necessary. But a lot of people believe that if I get that stuff on me, I'm liable to get the disease. Because, see, in this reality, that works that way. Somebody has an infection, and you get your hands in their infection, you better go wash your hands. You're liable to get that disease. So because you have that belief, you can get the disease by touching, getting your hands on it, because inside you somewhere, your belief says, uh-oh, I just, had contact with something diseased. I might get that, and you might get that. You actually may get their disease. So we use rubber gloves and tongs and all that stuff just to protect us from our own belief systems. That's why we did that. Now, a couple of other images that were neat. We threw things into the sun, and notice we were very neat and tidy. We cleaned up our mess, like all good workmen. We cleaned it up. We put it all in a jar. Now, we may have this jar, and it's maybe this big, and then we put tongs right in the jar with it, and our tongs are this big. Doesn't matter. Shrink them as they go in to fit. You're making it all up. You make it up to suit. You don't need a bigger jar. Oh, no, I can't. They won't fit. That's lack of imagination. Of course they'll fit. Screw in the jar, throw it into the sun. Why do we do that? It gets rid of it. It's gone. Why do we do that? Because you may have a belief that this stuff is laying around out there. Geez, you go out of body or whatever, you're liable to run into some goo that somebody, pulled out of someone else's liver, and hard to say what you might get out there. This gives you a sense of a job complete. It gives you a sense that you've cleaned up and that you haven't left mines out there to run into at a later time. So we do all this stuff because we're playing games with our belief system so that we don't get into trouble. There was a time, or there are some people, who believe that the only way they can heal, first off, was this laying on of hands. They actually had to touch, right? Because the energy comes out of their hands into the other person. If you can't touch, well, they can't do anything. So if they're far enough away that you can't touch them, then you can't help them. Well, that's just a limit. It's a limiting belief. It has nothing to do with your hands. It only has to do with your consciousness. Consciousness is the only active ingredient. That's a belief. There are other people who feel that the only way they can take an illness away from someone is they take it on themselves. So they will go to, a loved one or something, and they'll take that illness onto themselves. And that'll work because their intent was to get rid of it from that person. Their intent was to take it on themselves, and often that happens. They'll get ill with it. That's unnecessary. It's just a belief. You see, it doesn't help anything at all. It's just a belief that you can't actually get rid of anything. All you can do is shift it around, right? Nothing can be created or destroyed. We can only change its form. Well, you can only change it from you to me, and that's a belief, so that's the way they do it. So we don't need to lay on hands. We don't need pictures. We don't need to take anything on, but we do need to protect ourselves from our own beliefs. So wear your rubber gloves, right? Otherwise, you're liable to make yourself ill. Now, if you don't have any of these beliefs, then you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. But you have beliefs that you don't know about. That's why I say do it, because you can't say, well, I don't have any of those beliefs, so I won't pay any attention to it. You might. You'll know when you do. Okay, let's see. I think we've, one other thing. When you're healing people, you have to have respect for other people and other people's illness. Okay? Illness is not always a bad thing. Illness is often feedback. It's a result of the way we live and the way we feel and the way we think. It makes us sick when we are negative, when we're angry, and that kind of stuff. It has, we express that through our bodies often. Our bodies are an expression of our consciousness. Okay? So you have to respect that. The idea of healing or any other of these things where you influence people is not to rearrange the world the way you'd like to have it. Okay? Don't play God. That's not the point.